Hello, my name is Seth Fuchs. This is my individual professional presentation for Dr. Frederick Green's Business 230 Business Law and Ethics class. My subject is limited liability companies. In this presentation, we will go over the definition of LLCs, the history of LLCs, some advantages and disadvantages of LLCs. We'll talk about some large LLCs, how LLCs apply to me. We'll have a brief summary and finish with my references. The definition of LLC. LLC is short for Limited Liability Company. For this presentation, I will use LLC for short. An LLC is an extremely flexible business entity. The owner or owners of an LLC can create their own operating agreement. LLCs provide limited liability to members. There is no limit to the amount of members in an LLC. I will discuss all of this in more detail in just a minute. In 1977, Wyoming was the first state to introduce LLCs. When LLCs were first introduced, the law regarding LLCs was unclear. A lot of company owners or potential company owners were hesitant to start the company as an LLC because the law was unclear. There wasn't a lot of precedent or previous cases regarding LLC law. The IRS ignored LLCs until 1988. In 1988, the IRS classified LLCs as partnerships for federal income tax purposes. So basically, LLCs weren't even acknowledged by the IRS until 1988, and when they finally were acknowledged, they just got classified as partnerships. It wasn't until 1993 the IRS approved LLCs. And we'll talk about that right here. In 1993, the Delaware LLC Act became the standard for new LLC laws. This is pretty important because the Delaware LLC Act is what most states copied or at least based their LLC laws on. So, advantages of LLCs. The main advantage of LLCs is the ability to create their own operating agreement. This is what makes LLCs so flexible. This is important because the owner or founder of an LLC can create their own business or their own operating agreement. This allows the company to be extremely flexible, or LLCs in general to be extremely flexible and unique for each situation. LLCs can be set up to replicate a partnership, sole proprietorship, or corporation. This just adds to the flexibility of LLCs. LLCs provide limited liability members. This may seem obvious, but it is extremely important because before LLCs came around, if two or more people wanted to create or start a company together, they would have to create a partnership. The problem with a partnership is that each member of the partnership is liable for the other members of the partnership. So if one member gets sued, the whole partnership is liable. An LLC, however, provides members with limited liability. So if one member gets sued, the rest of the members have limited liability from that member and they are not liable. An LLC can choose whether it is taxed as a sole proprietorship, partnership, S corporation, or corporation. LLCs do not require a board of directors, minute book, or an annual meeting. This saves a lot of paperwork for small businesses. And obviously for a lot of small businesses. You don't need a board of directors or a minute book or an annual meeting because that's not really relevant. LLCs allow small business owners to create a barrier between personal and company activities. If the owner of, say, a grocery store had or owned that grocery store without an LLC, um, if the grocery store got sold or got sued, all the owner's personal assets would be liable. However, if the owner of that grocery store had the grocery store under an LLC, only that LLC would be liable and the owner's personal assets would be protected. So we'll talk about some disadvantages now. LLCs are subject to pass-through taxes. Shareholders must report profits on their income taxes whether they receive dividends or not. This is a disadvantage because if someone is a partner or a shareholder in an LLC and that LLC has a profit, that shareholder must report that profit on their income taxes whether they actually receive money from the LLC or not. Many states require LLCs to pay capital values tax and or self-employment tax. This just adds to the cost, which is bad for any company. The law can still be unclear in some areas of LLCs because LLCs create their own operating activity agreements. Each one is unique, so there's a lot of cases where the law or that situation has never come up in courts before, so there's not a lot of precedent for LLC laws a lot of times. So here we'll talk about some large limited liability companies. All of the following companies are set up as large LLCs. Mars Candy with an annual revenue of $25 billion, Chrysler Auto with an annual revenue of $50 billion, GMAC with an annual revenue of $30 billion, Koch Industries with an annual revenue of $100 billion. There's a lot more huge companies that are set up as LLCs, but you can see from these four, the LLCs are relevant in just about any industry. You can see Mars Candy is part of the food industry. Chrysler Auto is an automaker. GMAC is a finance company. And Koch Industries is involved in agriculture and technology. How LLCs apply to me. This is actually why I chose this for my subject. I knew I was part of an LLC, but I didn't know a whole lot about LLCs, and I wanted to learn more. So this is how LLCs apply to me. I'm a partner of the Joanne Fuchs Ranch Family LLC. I own 10.05%. Each of my three brothers owns 10.05%. My father owns 6.4%, and my grandmother owns the remaining 53.4%. My parents own 3 LLCs. They own one for their ranch. They own an LLC for their rental houses, and they have recently opened a new LLC for their new donkey sanctuary. So in summary, we talked about the definition of LLCs, how they are an extremely flexible business entity. We talked about the history of LLCs. The first LLC laws were enacted in 1977 in Wyoming, and most LLC laws are based off the Delaware LLC Act. We talked about some advantages of LLCs. How LLCs allow founders of a company to create their own operating agreement. We talked about some disadvantages, how LLCs are subject to or are often subject to more taxes, and and we talked about large LLCs, how huge companies can be set up as limited liability companies. And we talked about how LLCs apply to me personally, how my parents own 3 LLCs, my grandmother and my brothers and my father and I are all partners in another LLC. So finally, we will go over my references. This article by Stephen D. Goldberg had a lot of information on what LLCs were, the history of LLCs, and that sort of stuff. This article by All Business Editors talked about the pros and cons of limited liability companies. This article by PR Log talked about some of the biggest LLCs in the United States. There's a lot more than I put in this presentation there. I thought it was very interesting. Joanne Fuchs is my grandmother. She's a retired CPA, so she had a lot of input as far as her LLC. My brothers, my father, myself, and her are all partners in. Ethan Fuchs is my father. He is a retired lawyer, and he had a lot of input to as far as my parents' 3 LLCs. So that is all I have. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I sure enjoyed creating it. So that's it.